The hum of conversations filled the air as Danielle Morgan stepped into the first-class cabin, her carry-on rolling smoothly behind her. Clad in a tailored charcoal blazer, she exuded quiet confidence, her posture perfect, her movements effortless. To most, she was just another business traveler, but Danielle recognized the subtle glances, the quick once-overs from people trying to figure out if she belonged there. She lifted her bag into the overhead compartment with practiced ease, every movement second nature after years in the aviation world. This wasn't her first time on the Seattle to Atlanta route, but today, she wasn't in the cockpit. Today, she was a passenger taking a much-needed break before her next assignment. The moment Danielle settled in a seat 3B, she felt it, the weight of stairs. A flight attendant, early 30s, platinum blonde hair pulled into a too-tight ponytail, stood whispering to a coworker near the galley. The smirks they shared weren't subtle. Danielle's jaw tightened, but she ignored it. Moments later, the blonde approached. Her name tag read Madison. "Ma'am, I think you might be in the wrong seat," Madison said, voice coated in forced politeness. Danielle turned slowly. "Excuse me." Madison gestured stiffly toward Danielle's seat. "This is first class." "I am aware," Danielle replied coolly. She retrieved her boarding pass, presenting it with calm precision. "Seat 3B." Madison's eyes flicked over the pass. A flash of surprise crossed her face before she pasted on a brittle smile. "Oh, my mistake." She stepped back, exchanging another smirk with a brunette attendant nearby. This one younger, her name tag reading Emily. Danielle exhaled through her nose and drummed her fingers on the armrest. It was the same old routine, people seeing her and assuming less. Despite everything she had accomplished, people like Madison always found a reason to doubt. A few rows ahead, a businessman in a sharp navy suit stole a glance at her, his curiosity barely masked. She could read his mind. How could she afford this seat? Danielle ignored him. Emily soon returned, balancing a tray of welcome drinks, champagne and orange juice. Danielle reached for a glass, but Emily subtly pulled the tray back. "Would you like something from Coach?" she asked, sugar-coated sweetness dripping from her voice. "If this isn't your style, we have other options." Danielle's hand hovered midair before she calmly met Emily's gaze. "This will do." Emily hesitated, then walked away, the tension thick in the air. Danielle had spent her life navigating moments like these. The polite dismissals, the veiled microaggressions wrapped in customer service smiles. She could have spoken up, but she chose silence. For now, the captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "Good afternoon, folks. Welcome aboard Flight 985, nonstop to Atlanta. We're expecting a smooth flight today, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride." "Smooth flight, huh?" Danielle thought wryly, closing her eyes. As the plane climbed, flight attendants bustled about, distributing meal trays and drinks. Madison passed by without acknowledging Danielle until she finally set down her tray, just a bit too forcefully, making the silverware clatter. Danielle didn't flinch. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman, her diamond-studded wristwatch catching the overhead light, leaned over. "So, you're really a pilot?" Her voice hovered between fascination and disbelief. Danielle didn't bother to elaborate. "Yes." The woman chuckled awkwardly. "Well, I've never met a female pilot before. Especially not." She caught herself, offering a tight smile. "You must be one of a kind." Danielle tilted her head. "I suppose I am." Turbulence hit. At first, it was minor, a soft jolt that made a few drinks ripple. But then, a second, harsher tremor made the plane dip. Danielle's pilot instincts kicked in immediately. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with seat belts fastened," Madison announced, her voice steady but thinner than before. Danielle's sharp eyes scanned the cabin. Something wasn't right. She had flown thousands of hours. This wasn't typical turbulence. A third jolt hit, harder this time. The plane lurched, and frightened gasps echoed around her. Danielle gripped the armrest as the intercom crackled again, this time with a different voice. "The first officer." Ladies and gentlemen, we're assessing some unexpected turbulence. Please stay seated. His tone was tight, his words strained. Danielle is gut twisted. This wasn't just rough air. There was a real problem. She undid her seatbelt just as Emily passed by. "Ma'am, please stay seated," Emily said, panic creeping into her voice. "There's something wrong with the cockpit," Danielle said firmly. Emily hesitated. "The captain's, he's unwell." Danielle's decision was instant. "I need to get to the cockpit." Madison swooped in. "Absolutely not." Danielle locked eyes with her, calm but unwavering. "I'm a senior captain for this airline. I have more flight hours than both your pilots combined." Madison scoffed, but Danielle was already pulling out her airline ID. The laminated badge glinted under the cabin lights. Madison's jaw dropped. "Move," Danielle ordered. Emily, torn between protocol and panic, opened the cockpit door. Inside, chaos. The captain slumped unconscious in his seat. The first officer, young and sweating bullets, struggled to keep the plane steady. Danielle slid into the captain's seat, her hands instinctively reaching for the controls. "I'm taking over." The first officer's hands trembled. "He just collapsed." "I've been trying." "Focus," Danielle interrupted. "We're landing this plane." She radioed air traffic control, her voice crisp. "This is Captain Danielle Morgan. I'm taking command of Flight 985. We're declaring an emergency and rerouting for immediate landing." Clearance was granted for Memphis International. Danielle took control. The turbulence was relentless, the wind battering the aircraft as if determined to break it. But Danielle was relentless, too. She fought for stability, making small, precise adjustments, feeling the weight of every life on board. Minutes stretched into agonizing eternities. The runway finally appeared, a strip of salvation cutting through the darkness. "Flaps down," Danielle ordered. The first officer obeyed. The plane's wheels screeched against the tarmac. For a moment, it felt like they might bounce right off, but then they steadied. The aircraft rolled to a stop. For a beat, silence. Then, wild applause erupted from the cabin. Danielle let out a long breath. It was over. On the tarmac, emergency vehicles swarmed the plane. Danielle stepped out into the cool night air, exhaustion catching up with her. She wasn't looking for applause. She had done her job. The first officer caught up to her, gratitude etched across his face. I couldn't have done that without you." "You could have," Danielle replied. "But you didn't have to." Before she could head toward the terminal, Madison appeared, looking pale and small. Madison started, voice cracking. "I judged you. I made assumptions." Danielle tilted her head. "Would it have mattered if I hadn't saved the plane?" Madison hesitated, then whispered, "I don't know." Danielle nodded once. "That's the real problem." She left Madison standing there, stunned. Inside the terminal, Danielle was nearly at the exit when another voice stopped her. "Ma'am." It was the middle-aged woman from first class. Her voice was softer now, laced with humility. "I misjudged you," the woman said. "Thank you for saving us." Danielle studied her before replying, "Have a safe trip home." As Danielle walked out into the night, she felt the same familiar freedom that had always drawn her to the skies. She didn't need their approval. She had the sky. And that was enough.